Hey everyone, how's it going? Matthew Kadish here, author of the Earthman Jack Space Saga, available on Amazon.com if you want to go check it out. And today I'm going to be talking about Red Sonja, which is a spin-off of the Conan the Barbarian mythos. If you guys are fans of Conan, you might know that there was a 1985 film version of Red Sonja, which starred Arnold Schwarzenegger and Brigitte Nielsen. And it's basically a story about a female warrior who is granted powers from a goddess and wears a very revealing chainmail bikini and goes around kicking butt. So it seems like, a great kind of concept for a bit of an exploitative action fantasy film. And a lot of fantasy films are very popular now, especially superhero films. So when you have a character that's imbued with powers by a goddess, instantly goes into superhero territory. And Red Sonja has actually been languishing in kind of development hell for quite some time. Originally, it was going to be remade by Robert Rodriguez and starring his then girlfriend, who he was having an affair with at the time, Rose McGowan. I believe they announced it at Comic-Con back in 2008. And that project of theirs kind of fell apart. I don't know what exactly the reasoning behind that was. I think financing might have fallen through, or it might have had to do with Rodriguez and McGowan kind of breaking up. Who knows? But it kind of went through a few more iterations, and eventually it was going to be directed by Bryan Singer. Now, for those of you who don't know who Bryan Singer is, he's the director who brought the X-Men movies to life. So he was the one who did the original X-Men movie. He did X2. He then left the franchise to go off and do other movies, and he eventually came back. But he was a very well-known filmmaker. In fact, he produced the TV show House on Fox, and he most recently did Bohemian Rhapsody. So he's a pretty well-known filmmaker, and he was attached to be the one to kind of shepherd this project. But there were a few problems that sprung up due to his involvement. The biggest of which was that Bryan Singer had been accused of sexual misconduct. And this is all alleged stuff, so there's really no proof to it. But this type of accusation had been following him around for quite some time from multiple different accusers. So in the wake of the Harvey Weinstein Me Too sexual harassment movement, Singer kind of came under renewed focus, and his involvement with the Red Sonja film basically became kryptonite to it. But in addition to that, Singer has also, I guess in recent years, kind of developed a reputation for being an unreliable presence on these movies. There was a lot of reports coming off of Bohemian Rhapsody that he would just not show up to set, and he'd take off in the middle of production to go back to America when they were shooting in the UK for like a week, just for reasons that couldn't be justified. And so basically the movie had to continue shooting without him, and the cinematographer, I think, kind of took over the directing duties and stuff like that. And he's kind of gotten a reputation for doing that on other movies as well that he's been involved in. So producers don't want to work with him anymore, not only because of the sexual allegations, but also, because of his bad working behavior. So because of that, the Red Sonja movie that he was attached to kind of got flipped around in development hell again, but they quickly replaced Bryan Singer with a new director named Jill Soloway, who's coming on board to not only direct the Red Sonja movie, but write it as well. And for those of you who don't know who Jill Soloway is, she is the creative head behind the Amazon TV show Transparent, which is about a family whose father transitions from being a man to a woman. And just to kind of set the stage for this article that I'm going to read from Entertainment Weekly, I wanted to share with you this other article from Critical Hit Entertainment, or criticalhit.net, and just kind of give you a little bit of a background on Soloway as well as the character of Red Sonja in case you're unfamiliar with her. So we see that, she's had a lot of comic book adaptations of her in the past, and she's kind of pulled from the Conan the Barbarian series, and you can see that one of her most distinctive things is that she has like a chainmail bikini set of armor, which is very impractical, but hey, it looks good. So what are you going to do? But in all fairness, the Conan the Barbarian style warriors, they don't wear much more than a loincloth as well anyway. So equal opportunity exploitation on this one. But this is a picture of Jill Soloway. And I'm just going to read you a couple paragraphs from this this article here. So, Red Sonja was originally created by writer Roy Thomas and artist Barry Windsor Smith for Marvel Comics in 1973. Red Sonja is heavily based on Conan creator Robert E. Howard's character Red Sonja. So, if you notice, Red Sonja is spelled Sonja, and the original character by Robert E. Howard was Red Sonja, Sonya. So, very minute difference there, but I guess enough to get past the rights issues. As well as his other creation, Dark Agnes de Chastillon, a 16th century swashbuckler. The character has been rebooted a few times since then, with publication changing from Marvel Comics to Dynamite Entertainment in 2005. Her original backstory stayed relatively the same, though, and saw her as a woman whose family is murdered and who is raped by evil soldiers when she's too weak to defend herself. Pleading for the means to get revenge, the warrior goddess Scathach, however you pronounce it, Scathach, answers her prayers, giving her tremendous fighting skills, but forbidding her from lying with a man unless he bests her in fair combat. Although originally introduced as having inconspicuous looks and wearing rather nondescript garb, later artists would give her a voluptuous figure barely concealed by tiny chainmail bikinis. This rather ridiculous look would become her most well-known trait. There's no denying the exploitative sexism in Red Sonja's original design, as well as parts of her origin story. And while later versions of the character, in particular writer Gail Simone's modern classic run, would subvert those tropes and turn them into empowering aspects of the character, it would still take a sensitive filmmaker to bring the character to the screen respectfully. Soloway, who identifies as a non-binary and gender non-conforming, because of course she does, has clearly shown in their work that they have a fantastic grasp of gender and sexual dynamics, which will definitely be needed here. Soloway may not have the mainstream brand recognition of Bryan Singer, but the latter has been embroiled in some rather serious sexual assault allegations. That is not who you want attached to your character. That is so sexually complex. So it's obvious that in the wake of Bryan Singer's kind of sexual misconduct allegations, that the producers of this wanted to bring in someone who obviously was a woman who could kind of shepherd the presentation of this character in a way that was a little bit more politically correct. And of course, I don't think you can get any more politically correct than a non-binary, gender non-conforming filmmaker such as Jill Soloway here. And I'm not dissing her. She can have whatever pronouns that she wants. The only thing I care about is whether or not she's going to tell a good story and make a good movie. And from all signs, transparent, it's not my type of show. I haven't watched it, but I've heard really good things about it. And as we go into this article, we're going to see that I feel like Jill Soloway, she has some good concepts and a good grasp of what type of story she wants to tell. The question is, can she be entertaining without being preachy? And that's what I'm going to focus on as I read through the Entertainment Weekly article. So, Red Sonja director Jill Soloway likens the film to Deadpool and The Dark Knight. The transparent creator sees their film's protagonist as the first kind of bad girl superhero. So, Red Sonja director Jill Soloway has some big ideas for the reimagined heroine. I can really have so much fun with Red Sonja, she says. I see her a little bit more like the first kind of bad girl superhero, Soloway told Deadline during the Television Critics Association on Saturday. Sort of like Batman of The Dark Knight or Deadpool, Now, those two characters could not be more different from one another in terms of, how they're presented. The Batman of The Dark Knight is very serious and brooding. And Deadpool is not serious at all. Like he's very flippant. He's very kind of jokey. So it's a weird contrast that she chose those two. I think it was more like she was talking about the tone of those movies as opposed to the actual characters themselves. Both films were critically lauded for their edgy, psychologically complex dives into their titular protagonists. Deadpool especially won fans for its subverted superhero film tropes by breaking the fourth wall and using dark humor. It seems Soloway is similarly looking to challenge the traditions of the genre. I don't know quite what genre they're talking about here. Is it the superhero genre? Is it the fantasy genre? What does Red Sonja fall into? It seems like Soloway is looking at this as more than just a straight up kind of sword and sorcery fantasy film. She's looking at it as more of a superhero film. So we'll see how that works out. The world is changing so much right now for superheroes that I really just look forward to not only going to the edge of what I've ever written and directed before, but to the edge of the genre as well. She said, Red Sonja is based on the 1970s comic book spin-off to Conan the Barbarian and follows the sword and sorcery heroine who is given powers by a goddess. A film adaptation starring Brigitte Nielsen and Arnold Schwarzenegger was released in 1985. Soloway also compared their Red Sonja to their other creation, Transparent. The series, which is set to end on September 27th with a musical finale, focuses on a family's journey as their patriarch comes out as a transgender woman. Although they acknowledge the comparison may be surprising, Soloway said that their new project feels really very much like it's coming from the same place in its exploration of the divided feminine. Now, keep this concept in mind of the divided feminine because this seems to be the primary focus of how Soloway is going to be handling this character. And it's a little bit interesting. We're going to talk about it in a bit. The idea that can be seen in works from Charlie's Angels to Sex and the City asserts that women get chopped up into archetypes like wife, bad girl, or good girl, Soloway said, whereas their work, like the 2013 film Afternoon Delight and Transparent, has been about challenging that incomplete notion. If you look at Transparent, it's really about a lot of women becoming whole. It's Sarah becoming whole. It's Mara becoming whole, Soloway said. All my work is really about humans searching for some divine feminine, asking these questions about God and looking for meaning. So for me to transfer that into the world of Red Sonja felt incredibly natural because Red Sonja is a very different kind of superhero. She's not really typical. In July, it was announced that Soloway was replacing Bryan Singer as director of Red Sonja. The news came after The Atlantic's lengthy report on the long history of accusations of sexual assault and misconduct against the filmmaker. Soloway will also write and produce the remake. In both the source material and its 1985 film adaptation with Brigitte Nielsen, the character's backstory begins with her being raped and left for dead. She is also famous for her bikini armor, although in certain issues she dresses more conservatively. With Soloway's track record of making progressive content, it's likely that the reimagined Red Sonja will feature a less sexualized version of the character on screen. All right, so let's unpack this a little bit. Obviously, Soloway is known for being a more progressive kind of filmmaker in the sense that those are her politics. She's a feminist. She's obviously, kind of someone who advocates for trans rights and stuff like that. And she's interested in exploring, how these things kind of affect people. And I can respect her for that. I think that this concept of the divided feminine is very interesting, especially for a character like Red Sonja, because it is meant to be a female main character, so you can explore these types of issues with a character like her. The thing is that I take a little bit of an issue with the divided feminine concept is that this isn't just relegated to women. I mean, men have these different archetypes as well. You have like the husband, the father, the bad boy, the good boy, the responsible guy, the rebel. So you can't just say like, oh, this is unique to women how we explore these characters. Everyone kind of has compartmentalized parts of their personality, of their lives, and we get kind of shoehorned into these predetermined roles that just exist in society. And, I don't feel like there's anything wrong in focusing on the aspects that apply directly to women. But this idea that it's the divided feminine, I think, is a little bit of a mislabel. It should just really be, something that encompasses everyone. And it just so happens that when you focus on a female character, you're focusing on the roles that tend to gravitate more towards them. So I find it kind of interesting that someone who calls themselves non-binary tends to kind of gravitate more towards, feminine issues. But, what are you going to do about that? However, I would like to point out that this concept as a theme in a story about a woman who is a rape survivor and who eventually finds some type of power to become a great warrior and like reclaim her, her life and become a whole person again after that type of trauma is very interesting. And I think that if you're going to explore any type of like feminist messaging or female empowerment type thing, then doing it with a female fantasy character is probably a good way to go about doing it, because you can create all types of allegories in a fantasy world that would probably be obnoxious if you were to try to do it in something a little bit more contemporary. So I feel like Soloway is an interesting choice for this movie going forward, because, if Robert Rodriguez had gotten his version off the ground, it would have been incredibly exploitative in the sense that it would have been sexy, it would have been funny, it would have been like crazy action type stuff. Rose McGowan would have been running around in a chainmail bikini and nobody would have batted an eye. But with Soloway at the helm, I feel like this is going to be a little bit more of a thoughtful take on the character. And, to me, it's not necessarily about whether the character is male or female. It's about whether the character is well written and interesting. And I feel like she can bring a dimension to Red Sonja that maybe people aren't used to, especially when you compare it to the 1985, Brigitte Nielsen version of the movie, which, I remember not being very good. So I feel like there's a lot of potential here for how Soloway wants to take the character, in the sense that she's looking at this character as a superhero. She obviously has a specific tone in mind where there's going to be humor, kind of like in Deadpool, but there's also going to be like a dark, kind of dramatic story to it, like in The Dark Knight. And then you're going to have these kind of like progressive feminist concepts introduced around the central character. Now, the question is, can she do this without coming off as preachy or obnoxious? Because if you look at a movie like Captain Marvel, for instance, that was something that kind of explored these similar issues and tried to hit that tone where, like they tried to make Captain Marvel funny and they tried to make her a superhero and all this stuff. But it just came off as preachy and annoying when you look at all the feminist messaging that was injected into that movie. And there's a right way to do feminist messaging, and there's a wrong way to do it. And the wrong way to do it is to berate men and make men out to be the villains strictly based on their gender, as opposed to having it be character-centric stuff. And I feel like Soloway, because of her background in basically low-budget drama, probably might understand that a little bit more than the filmmakers who made Captain Marvel do. So I'm a little bit hopeful for this. What do you guys think? Do you think Red Sonja is going to be worth checking out? Do you think Soloway is going to make it way too woke and it's going to, bomb at the box office? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please let me know in the comments section. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate the support, because on this channel, I will bring you all the best movie, TV, and entertainment news always. And I will catch you in the next video. See you guys later.